Heavenly Father, thank you so much for gathering us here today on this wonderful Friday night. As the song says, you are always there through thick and thin, and though we had a rough week, may it be so, I pray that during this time, we've just come before you to listen to you and to hear your word today. So Lord, would you guide us during this time? We know that you're here, and we are excited to hear your word today. So thank you for all that you do. You are so good. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. Yeah. You guys may take a seat. All right. Woo. I don't know if you guys ever heard that song. Like, ever? But that's a fire song to listen on a car ride. Listen to it at least 5 days of the week, probably. That and, what's it called? Rolling Stone? Another Stone. If you never listened to Another Stone, I should listen to that by Elevation. It's also a fire song that I listen to at least 5 times a week. All right, 5 days of the week, for clarification. What am I saying? Anyways, hello. Welcome to another Beyond Grace. I'll be preaching here today because it's just better. Yeah. So, welcome. As you guys know, or may not know, we are in a new series called Baby Steps, right? And it's basically a series that talks about why it's hard to take the next step in faith. And I think we've all been there. I think we've all had that time in our lives where it's like, I cannot take the next step of faith no matter how hard I try. No matter what I go to, no matter what I try, it's just not happening, right? And there are 5 things that we're going to discuss through the course of the series. These 5 heavy things that weigh our hearts, that make it hard for us to take that step, right? And in terms of the first one, we talked about bitterness. Ooh, I should have made you guys answer that, but it's okay, bitterness. We talked about bitterness Sunday, and does anyone remember the character? Yeah, there you go, Joseph. It's not that hard, guys, it's just one name. I've probably mentioned at least 20 times that one day, that one sermon, but hey, we got there. Thank you, Colin. But yeah, it was Joseph. We talked about Joseph Sunday, and how Joseph, even though he had the worst possible life, literally speaking, by the way, he was able to overcome bitterness and still forgive. He was able to do 3 simple things, which was move with God, find success in God, and not forget, but able to let go of his bitter heart. Which is why he was able to be who he was, and what the Bible states about him, right? So Joseph was an awesome dude. He was like an awesome character, an awesome real-life character that we got to learn from for bitterness. But today is a new day. And today, we are going to introduce something new, as it should be, right? But of course, because we're on the same week, we are going to still talk about bitterness, but I'm going to talk about another aspect of bitterness that I think can be, most likely, more relatable to you guys, right? Today, yes, we're tackling bitterness again, but this time, we're going to learn about the effect that bitterness can have on our hearts, and that is a desire for control. Having a bitter heart naturally causes us to have a desire for control. So if you desire control in your life, if you desire for things to happen in your life, I would advise to check your heart and see if there's any bitterness that you may have, right? And I'll get more into it as time goes on, but that's why today's sermon is titled Surrendering Control. Surrendering control. Now, as I go on through the sermon, know and always remember that bitterness is at the core. Bitterness is what we're tackling, right? But by tackling bitterness, we are going to learn how to surrender control. We are going to learn how to go against it, move towards a more humble and prostrated heart, meaning like a proper posture of heart. Postrated, you know? Yeah, and so as we go through, as I said for the series, we're going to look at biblical figures to guide us through the experiences and how they were able to overcome these heavy steps. And today, we are going to look at a very well-known guy, and his name is David. Ooh. I'm sure you guys know David, Mr. King David himself. And you're like, oh, David, you mean the guy that took down Goliath? Yeah, that guy. You mean the guy that became king? Yeah, that David. And there's a lot of stories that you guys probably know about David because he's done a lot of things in the Bible, right? But we're going to focus on a few things that obviously point to how did he surrender control and how did he avoid bitterness in his life, which is what we need to do in our everyday life, right? So, once again, when I go through the, who David is and like everything about David, super cliff note version, super like cut summary version, because I can't tell you guys everything as much as I want to for time's sake, for respect out of your time, right? So, very cliff note version. Here we go. All right. Before David, we're going to talk about before David came to the picture of the Bible. There's a lot that happened. It's okay, you can read the paper, you're fine. There's a lot that happened before David came into the Bible, right? The very first thing is that we jump into the book of 1 Samuel. This is the very beginning of 1 Samuel. And who is Samuel? Let's just say Samuel's a guy that basically his mother prayed for him a lot. Very, basically put. Make sure to read the Bible because there's a lot of context I'm missing, but that's who Samuel was. And Samuel, as he lived this holy and good life, he eventually became the ruler of Israel. Samuel was the ruler of Israel for quite some time. And by being a ruler, he grew old. And naturally, as a ruler grows old, Israel needs new leaders, right? And of course, for Samuel, he had sons, but his sons were not the best. His sons were not proper rulers, and so Israel was like, Samuel, we need a king. Where is our king? Because your sons are not in, man. We need an actual proper king. So Samuel went to God and was like, God, we need a king. Can you please lead me to a king? And then God led Samuel to Saul, King Saul, right? Now, who was Saul? There's a lot of context to it, but basically, Saul was the first king that God basically led Samuel to, right? And he did really well. Saul was a good king for the first 42 years he was king. For the first 42 years of king, Saul was a good king. But after 42 years, he disobeyed God. There's a lot of context as to how he disobeyed God, but just for your reference sake, he disobeyed God. And Samuel rebuked him. He was like, oh, Saul, why did you disobey God's orders? You've been such a good king for so long. How could you do this? And Saul was like, my bad, man. I won't do it again. We're good. We're straight. We're going. Okay? So that all got fixed up. But the bad thing is that Saul did it again. He disobeyed God again. And then by that time, God was like, I'm going to reject Saul as king. So basically, God made sure that Saul is this. Basically, he got degraded. He's not king anymore in God's eyes, right? And Samuel made sure to tell that to Saul. And so now Samuel's like, all right, God, well, we need a new king. Since Saul, you don't think is king, right? So who is this king? Now this is where David appears. So, who is David? Who is David and who is David coming from, right? Now, David was the youngest son of 8 brothers, right? His family had 8 sons, and he was the youngest among all of them. And his job was being a shepherd, right? Whether you know this or not. And what does a shepherd entail? It means his job was to take care of the sheep. That's it. His job was to make sure the sheep were good, make sure they were safe, make sure there was no danger or no damages to the sheep. That was his one and only job that was mentioned in the Bible. And so, Samuel came to this family because God was like, ooh, go to this family by the father named Jesse, for he has 8 sons and there's a king among them, blah, 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 blah. And so Samuel was like, all right, I got you, boom. Let me look at all your sons, Father Jesse, because God told me one of them is going to be the next king. He looked at all 7 who were tall, masculine, and all this other stuff, and he was like, no, none of these guys are the king. Because God told him, I don't look at the outward appearance, I look at the heart. And so Samuel was basically telling Jesse, do you have another son? And Jesse was like, yes, I have David. All right, bring me David. I'm not going to leave until I see this man. All right, got you, bet. And so Jesse brought over David, and David was anointed, right? He's not king yet, but he was anointed because God told Samuel, oh, this is the king that's going to be king over Israel one day. And so he was anointed, boom, right there and then. And then there's a series of events that God cooked up, and basically, eventually, David became the armor bearer of Saul. Now, this could be a little confusing, so stay with me. At the time, Saul was still king. He was still king of Israel, but God doesn't see him as king. So you guys have to make that very clear. Even though Saul was king in the world, God didn't see him as a proper king. Okay? Make that very clear. So, because Saul was still king, God eventually moved David up to be the armor bearer of Saul. And that's where he did all these amazing things, you know? That's where he took down Goliath, that's where he became a hero, that's where everybody adored him, right? That's how David grew up, and that's how he became to the position that he is. And this is where the conflict starts. The conflict. And so, what happens? King Saul naturally gets very afraid, right? And jealous of this guy who's handsome, who's doing everything that a king is supposed to do. He's the hero, and like I said, he's good looking, and he has all these things, and people know that God is with him wherever he goes. And so King Saul's like, oh shoot, this guy's gonna be king. This guy's gonna overthrow me. Oh my gosh, what should I do? And he's afraid. He's like, dude, I am so scared of this guy because he's gonna basically take my position as king. What should I do? And of course, King Saul resorts to, I'm gonna kill this man. That's basically what his answer was. And so things happened, and basically King Saul tried to kill David, even though David didn't do anything, literally. David was just heeding orders, listening to and obeying, and doing everything he can just to be a good guy. But the King Saul was like, nah, you suck, I'm gonna try killing you, and that happened. So David, luckily, escaped, and they're on this chase. They're on this chase where there is no specific time, the Bible says, but a lot speculate, at least, at minimum, the chase happened for 5 years. At minimum. It could have been more, but at minimum, 5 years. So imagine you're getting chased 5 years of your life, right? It's like basically tag, but like 24/7 for 5 years. And like, you can't get in, otherwise you die. Right? That's basically what they're doing, right? Saul's chasing him out of this place, that place, they're running, and David has to like basically live in fear his whole life. Right? Or like, that's basically like how it feels like. And mind you, you were like basically, I think Solomon's age, maybe like 1 or 2 years older than Solomon. That's according to what people speculate. But yeah, so that's David's life. And this is where we begin to look, how was David able to handle the bitterness that he would have? Right? Like imagine you're being chased for 5 years. Imagine you didn't do anything, you didn't do a single thing wrong in your life. Like literally nada. And this is the guy that you served, right? Like let's just pretend it's me. You don't serve me, by the way, but I'm just saying, let's just pretend. You've been here, you've been attending church, and like, oh yeah, I've been your pastor, and you've been here, and then all of a sudden I'm like, this guy, I'm gonna get him, and kill is a very strong word, so I'm going to, I don't know, throw you down to the ground, I don't know, whatever. And you're like, oh heck nah, and I start chasing you for 5 years. I chase you away from your family, I chase you away from your hometown, I chase you away from everything that's comfortable. You gotta live in caves, you gotta live on the floor, you gotta go through hot nights, cold nights. It sucks. 5 at minimum years. That sucks. That absolutely sucks. So, after these supposed 5 years of chasing, there's finally came a day where there's a break point. There's a turning point of this chase, right? So, David and his army was hiding in a cave, right? So, let's just visualize. They're hiding in a cave. Now, this next part, do not visualize, because it's pretty bad. But just, head knowledge. Just know this is what happens. So, the King David and his army is hiding in a cave, and King Saul doesn't know they're in the cave. And King Saul enters the cave to poop, basically. He went inside the cave to, relieve himself and get rid of the waste that's in his body. Very properly put. And like, David and his army's just there like, oh shoot, this guy's right here in front of us, doesn't know we're here, got his pants down, we got him in the get-go. That's literally the situation. You don't believe me? Read the Bible. I'm literally telling the truth. So, that's the situation. And David's army's like, dude, you can totally kill him right now. He's literally like, just pooping. Like, it's so easy. There's nothing he can do about it, right? He's got his pants down. He's literally like, just doing there, chilling. Dude, you have an easy shot, bro. It's like the easiest 360 no-scope of your life. You just go in there and just bam, easy peasy. Right? So that's like, now David has the upper hand. Now David's able to be like, oh my gosh, this chase can finally be over. I can finally go back to my comfortable living, and I can finally stop getting chased by this king. And mind you, if he does kill Saul, he actually becomes the next king, right? That's usually how it works, right? But what did King David do? Or sorry, he's not king yet. What did David do? He went up, instead of stabbing King Saul, he cut a piece of cloth and went back. That's all he did. He just cut a piece of cloth and stepped back. And then after some time, he appeared in front of Saul and said, hey, King Saul, I'm right here. And let me tell you, I could have killed you right here and there, and this is the piece of cloth to have proof. This is your robe that I cut purposely to show you that I have done nothing wrong in my hands. I have done nothing wrong, and I am innocent, so please can we stop this chase? I know that you are God's anointed, and I do not want to kill you, and I've done nothing wrong, so let's make peace. And King Saul was basically like, okay, and now they're chilling. I'm a story, right? Ish. It was kind of long, and it was kind of sad, but they got there, and so they talked it out, and they were all good. There's a very peculiar pattern with King Saul of doing things again, right? Literally, they talked it out, and literally they made peace. And then literally okay, I can't tell you a specific timeline, but let's just say after some time, King Saul started chasing David again. For literally no reason. The Bible doesn't say a reason. It's just David was just chilling on his way, and out of nowhere, his man was like, bro, did you know that? Did you know that King Saul's like right there? He's like literally chasing you again. And David's like, oh, what? Nah, bro, that can't be Saul. We literally wrote it out. We're chill now. There ain't no way. And the army was like, nah, it's Saul's army, bro. You gotta check it out. So David was like, all right, I'll check it out. So David and this other guy by the name that starts with the letter A, I forgot, but basically there's a guy that goes with them to check the camp out. And they're like, all right, let's just see if King Saul's here. They snuck in, and they saw King Saul sleeping on his bed with a spear and a water jug, right? And so they're like, oh, shoot, it's actually King Saul. He's actually chasing me again. What the heck? And so the guy that went with David was like, dude, he's sleeping, and his spear is right there. I'll hold him down, just, basically. And David was like, nah, bro, that's not right. You know what David actually did, which was crazier? He actually went outside the tent and was like, who is the person that's supposed to guard King Saul? You are doing a terrible job. That's literally what he said. He went up to the person that's supposed to guard King Saul and was like, a person tried to kill King Saul and you did a terrible job. You're supposed to protect this guy. What are you doing? Isn't that crazy? That's wild. David literally protected the guy that tried to kill him. What the? Hello? That's insane. And that's basically how the story goes. And Saul, once again, they talked it out, wrote it out, and from then on, Saul stopped chasing David. But that's crazy. That's actually crazy. Honestly, when I was reading this, I knew everything up until that last point. Oh, I knew that King Saul was trying to kill David. I knew about the whole pooping story. I knew all that. I didn't know about the story where David literally rebuked the guy that was supposed to guard King Saul. And I was like, oh, that's wild. How can you do that, right? And basically, we're going to look at three things that David was able to be consistent in, and very valuable lessons for us to make sure that we don't have bitterness in our hearts. Number one, surrender circumstance and know your role. This is how David started off. David grew up very humble and didn't ever blame his circumstance, ever. He knew his role that he was placed. 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 34 to 37 says this. Listen very carefully, because this goes hard. Actually, every single verse I'm going to read goes hard, so listen carefully. All right, here we go. 34. But David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. Your servant being David. David has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, David went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from his mouth. When it turned on David, I seized it by his hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant, being David, has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine, Goliath, will be just like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The God who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. This is what he said to King Saul when he was fighting Goliath. What did David do throughout his whole life? By the way, his job was to take care of sheep. Is your job to take care of sheep? If you have to take care of sheep, you're basically putting your life on the line every single day. You want to fight a lion? You want to fight a bear? For sheep? I don't think so. But David never complained. He said, okay, this is my job, and I'm going to do it to the best I can. He didn't hold bitterness for his circumstance. For it narrows your focus, right? Bitterness narrows your focus on the circumstance. And I think that's a lot of us. Students, your circumstance is that you're a student. You narrow your focus on student. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm a student. And you get bitter. Why do I have to go through 12 years of education? Why do I have to go to school? Why do I have to do homework? Why do I have to study for my test? And you get bitter, right? Super bitter. Why? It's not just things you have to do. It's things that people compare you to. It's the standards of the world. It's all these different things that come with being a student. But do you want to fight a bear? Do you want to fight a lion? You had it so easy compared to David. But David never complained. He fulfilled his role, and he surrendered his circumstance to God. He told God, God, I know that this is my job, so I'll do it fully. He knew his role. He knew his role as a shepherd. He knew his role as a son. He knew his role as a brother. Same thing with you guys. Know your role, whether that be a student, whether that be a brother, whether that be a son, whether that be a daughter. You have these roles that God placed you in. Surrender it to God and do it fully, right? And trust me, when you do it, God will have greater things for you in store, because that's what happened with David. Okay, that's number one. Number two, surrendering justice. Surrendering justice. Right? Here, we're going to read 1 Samuel chapter 24, verses 11 to 13. This is what it says. 11. See, my father, look at this place of your robe in my hand. This is when David is talking to King Saul. I cut off the corner of a robe, but did not kill you. See that there is nothing in my hand to indicate that I am guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life. May the Lord judge between you and me, and may the Lord avenge the wrongs you have done to me. But my hand will not touch you. As the old saying goes, from evildoers come evil deeds, so my hand will not touch you. In other words, do not let bitterness cause you to act. Do not let bitterness cause you to act. If you act on bitterness, you will do things that you are not supposed to do. Right? And David knew this very well. Like he said, from evildoers come evil deeds. Are you guys evildoers? Do you want to be evildoers? It's a very, woke type of word, no? Like, when I walk up to you, do you want your middle name to be evildoer? That would suck, right? Solomon, evildoer you. What kind of name is that, right? It's not your name, don't worry, but I'm just saying. Like, do you want to be identified as an evildoer? No! Meaning, you surrender that choice to God to make. That's what David did. David literally said to King Saul, I am not going to place a hand on you. I'm not going to act out of bitterness. I'm not going to act out of contempt. I'm going to make sure that God judges this between us. Right? Because God is the God who judges, and God is the God who avenges. That's who God is. He will judge the wrongdoing, and He will avenge when the time is right. Your job, my job, as people who believe in God, and people who do not need bitterness in our hearts, need to surrender that type of justice. This person wronged me, so I need to wrong them back. That is justice. This person did this. This person needs to go to jail. I'm going to make sure he goes to jail. I'm going to take the proper actions. You can pray about it, and if God really tells you to do something about it, then sure. But if you're acting out of bitterness, you're not acting well. You're not acting right. You're not acting in the way that God wants you to act. So, don't let bitterness cause you to act. Surrender your sense of justice, because it is God who judges, and it is God who avenges. Yes? Yes. And the last point is surrendering opinion. Now, opinion is not the right word, but it's the best word I can think of, and you're going to understand what I'm getting off of, right? Here we go. Surrendering opinion. 1 Samuel chapter 26, verses 14 to 16 says this. He, meaning David, called out to the army and to Abner, son of Ner, aren't you going to answer me, Abner? And Abner replied, who are you who calls to the king? David said, you're a man, aren't you? Dang, what a call out. And who is like you in Israel? Why didn't you guard your Lord the king? This is the part where he's calling out the guard. And he's like, someone came to destroy your Lord the king. What you have done is not good. As surely as the Lord lives, you and your men must die, because you did not guard your master, the Lord's anointed. Look around you. Where are the king's spear and the water jug that were near his head? Dang, you're a man, aren't you? That's what David said to the guard. That's crazy. A lot of crazy shots. But what did he do? Don't let bitterness cloud your judgment. Everyone here, you have your judgment and discernment that is right and that is wrong. For David, anyone in their right mind, one, would call out to the guard, and two, would protect the guy that tried to kill him. Both those things in general are just like, why in the world would you do that? But he didn't let his bitterness cloud his judgment. Instead, he was very clear on what was to be right. He knew that King Saul was God's anointed, and he knew that because it's God's anointed, It is to be protected. It is to be guarded. He is to be valued, and he is to be someone that people are to respect. So even though King Saul tried to kill David, David was like, you have to protect this man with all your life. Because you didn't guard him, you deserve to die. That's wild. And why? Why is this so important? David didn't let bitterness take over. He stood for what was right in God's eyes, and even defended the man who tried to kill him. Right? Same with us. Same with us. There's no king around us, and there's no ruler around us, maybe. But don't look at people for who they are in your eyes. Look at them and see for who they are in God's eyes. Back in the day, this Old Testament days, yes, God anointed people, but guess what? In the modern day, Jesus died for every single person that is living and breathing on earth. Meaning, when you look at a person, are you able to defend them like David did? They could be your bully. They could be someone that makes fun of you. They could be someone that you hate for all your life. But King Saul chased David for 5 years, tried to kill him twice. Actually, 3 times. And yet, David, with a clear mind, no hesitation, said, this guy needs to be valued. Because God values this guy. Right? Same thing with